now it is time to turn our attention to the rugby. Quinny, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How are you?
Good. So the team obviously is in. We're in a great position this morning. We actually have a team to talk about. 6 changes from the Scotland win. Are you looking at the team that's been picked, thinking that it's been picked to play a certain way, or what are your thoughts on it?
Well, his hand has been forced a little bit with the injury, obviously, to James Ryan in the second row. I personally would have liked to have seen Ryan Baird start, give him a chance, throw him in there. But I suppose Ty Byrne moving him back into the second row and bring Conan into the back row, that's still a strong pack of forwards. Kilcoyne coming in for Cian Healy. It kind of indicates that he's not looking at impact off the bench. He's looking to start this game well, and if Ireland start well, it'll instill a bit of confidence and belief into the team and throw the kitchen sink at it early on. Peter O'Mahony coming on the bench obviously brings a lot of experience. I think with Peter O'Mahony being out for a number of weeks, there was talks that Ty Byrne would go into the second row and Peter O'Mahony would come in at 6. I think Jack Conan, him getting an opportunity at number 8, I kind of like that scenario. He's been involved with the squad for a few weeks now. He came off the bench last weekend. And obviously Gary Ringrose is out, so Bundy Aki comes back in there, and no shock with James Lowe not being picked in the wing. Stockwell has been pretty good. So I think some of the changes have been kind of they forced, his hand has been forced a little bit, but it still looks a strong Irish team. Wondering what way they'll play. Having Gary Ringrose not been the side, it takes away a little bit of that potential X-factor brilliance that he has, that ability to, even though he hasn't had a good Six Nations so far, but it's a strong team, it's a physical team, and I think they have to find some way to break England down. I think we've got our tactics wrong a few times against them. We've lost the last 4. We've been physically, not in the Nations Cup, I think. I think what happened in the Nations Cup in November, England just were ruthless when they got opportunities, and they punished Ireland and kicked very, very well. And we made far too many mistakes in that game, and our line-out has let us down against England. So it was very good last week against Scotland, but they've got to get their set piece right. And hopefully they can strike at some stage when they build some pressure, that they can take their opportunities. They didn't do that against France. They were battering away for 20-25 minutes early on in that game, and France went up the field and scored and changed the whole momentum of the game. So it's a strong Irish team, and they've got to start the game well, I think.
Yeah, and speaking of that sort of building up the pressure aspect of it, so the CJ Stander switch, to take that one, and we'll talk about him leaving in a little bit. But first of all, just on that positional switch, and he goes to 6. Just looking at it last night, Quinny, he's carried more ball than any other player in the Six Nations across all the teams by a mile as well. 64 carries. And next best in the entire tournament is Henshaw with 53. He's in the top 10 in metres made. Is he still going to do that role from 6, or will a lot of that fall now to Conan?
It'll be both of them, I think. If Ireland do well in this game, CJ Stander will play well, Jack Conan will play well, Josh van der Flier will play well. I think our back row up to this point have played pretty decent. Josh van der Flier is an incredibly talented player, but I think he needs a big game. We can't expect a result here if our back row are quiet. Billy Vunipola and Tom Curry are unbelievable players. They're starters for the Lions in a couple of months if it goes ahead. So Ireland have got to try and find a way of nullifying them. Curry was outstanding last week. He's a sensational player at the breakdown, but also as a ball carrier. He runs such aggressive lines, and Josh van der Flier has to match that. He's got to stop him. He's got to run himself with the ball. He's got to be aggressive. They've got to have an edge, and those two players, I think Jack Conan and Josh van der Flier, are incredibly talented. Josh van der Flier has been in the Irish team a lot more than Jack Conan, but Jack Conan has never really fulfilled his potential here. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's a brilliant player. He's played really well at the start of this tournament for Leinster in Pro 14. It is a big step up, but I just love to see him impose himself and be the one swatting players off, making carries, being really aggressive in those carries, because that's his game. He's a very talented player, and if he gets any sort of space, he's very quick. So to answer the question, we need, Jack Conan and CJ Stander making multiple carries. Just because Stander's gone 6, it doesn't really nullify or take away from the fact that he's not going to make carries, because we don't see number 8s break off scrums anymore. No one really does that. So Stander is vital to make those hard yards. Hopefully, Conan can get a little bit of space and make some inroads himself.
Do you see Conan as a mid-term option at the number 8 jersey, assuming Caelan Doris comes back to full fitness pretty soon?
Well, it's kind of unfair to say that, but there's merit in what you're saying. It's an opportunity for him. If Ireland win this game and Jack Conan plays a big game, well, the perception changes. Then we suddenly go, this guy he's actually international quality. He's been kind of in and out of squads for a couple of years now. He's got a couple of chances and never really grabbed that attention, if you like. He's never let the team down, but he hasn't played regularly enough. He has the ability and the talent to play at that level. He's big, he's strong, he's imposing. But the word imposing is what you want from your number 8. You want him having multiple involvements. And I think Doris has done that since he's kind of started with Ireland. He's incredibly talented. He's a brilliant footballer. And, you'd have to imagine that Doris is the one that, if we were to select everyone fit and well, that, Doris is in that Irish back row because of his talent and what he can do with the ball and without the ball. So that's what I'm saying. I'd love Jack Conan to kind of put his hand up and say, I've had injuries, I've had setbacks in the last couple of years. I've been, Joe had him in and out of squads. He had him in Australia in 2018. And he's never really grabbed hold of a jersey, and people go, and I had this myself probably. You're seen as that someone who can fill a gap and that you're in and out of squads a lot. I think he's potential to be closer to the national side than we've seen. It's a lot of pressure now when you get selected against England, the very good England side who have dominated us in the last 4 games. So it's a tough ask, and it's a little bit unfair that I'm kind of saying that that's where the pressure cooker is at for him. But, Stander is obviously, it's going to be his last game for Ireland. So there is going to be an opportunity there for maybe, Max Deegan to put his hand up as well when he comes back playing. But it's a good opportunity for Jack Conan. I really hope he has a big game, because I think it's in him. But he has to have a big game at this level to grab that attention, if you like.
Is it you mentioned about how unfair it is? Is there similar sort of an element to play with Tadhg Beirne, Quinny? Do you think, like, he's one of our foreign players in the Six Nations this year, one of the foreign players across the tournament, must be fancying his chances of, he's certainly thinking about getting a call from Warren Gatland, I would think, at some point in the form that he's in. Is it a bit unfair on him now as well, given that there were options for the second row?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's unfair, and I'd say I'm sure he doesn't mind. He's now jumped the gun, and he's now seen as an important part of this Irish side, and that's where he's at, and that's what I'm talking about. Jack Conan, when you get some big performances and you're seen as a really important player for Ireland, that's the way Tadhg Beirne is seen now. So I don't know how he feels about playing in the second row, but I think he's been brilliant in the back row for Ireland, and I would have liked to have seen him stay at 6 for this game, and Ryan Baird come into the second row. I can fully understand what they've done, and this is, I'm just glad that they've in moving him to the second row, that they've kind of brought in the next in line. It's not that Peter O'Mahony isn't a top quality player. He is. The only concern I would have had, and I wouldn't have wanted him to put Tadhg Beirne in the second row and put Peter in the back row straight away, because he hasn't played matches in over 6 weeks. I think Conan has been there. He's probably chomping at the bit, and having Peter O'Mahony's experience to come off the bench and be thereabouts is important. But I just would have liked to have seen Tadhg Beirne left where he is. And I think a slight concern for me would be the line-out, because Henderson, James Ryan, and Ty Byrne have worked really well together in getting up in the opposition ball, and there's a little bit of that is negated now. I know Jack Conan is pretty tall himself as a number 8, and they'll use him defensively and offensively. But what Ty Byrne has done around the field, and I was very surprised he was taken off last week, because he's someone that can come up with a big play. But let's hope he does that. And the reason we probably talk about, we've gone to Quinn Roux before. We've gone for power player in the second row because we're playing England. And I'm glad we haven't done that this time. So we've a very mobile pack, and we have struggled physically against them. But we've got to hold on to the ball, play with a high tempo, and kick very accurately, and match them confrontationally as best we can. We've dominated possession and territory in all the games we've played, but we haven't been anywhere as efficient as we can be. So Ireland, right across the board, have just to be a lot sharper and cut out the turnovers and the mistakes, and hopefully we're not talking about the power game afterwards and saying, well, we were a little bit like Ty Byrne is not a small man, but he's not a huge second row. He's a very big back row, but he's not a huge second row. And they have Charlie Ewells and Atoje, who are big and powerful. Johnny Hill to come off the bench, so they're big men. But I think right across the board, the Irish pack have to be very collective and perform together.
Well, on that point then about the power game, and that's been spoken about a lot, and you've mentioned it on the show as well over the weeks, and maybe part of that selection was due to their thirst to have David Kilcoyne, it seems, in the front row over Cian Healy. Obviously, Kilcoyne, a dynamic player in the loose, but are we accepting now that we're going to be more vulnerable in the scrum with that switch? And what impact will that, when you talk about
I don't think so. I think Dave Kilcoyne is very experienced now, and I think it's obviously going to be a challenge, and I think Kyle Sinclair will fancy his chances against Kilcoyne, and the English coach Matthew Proudfoot will probably target him because he hasn't started for Ireland in one of these big games for a while. Cian Healy's been ever present and been brilliant for Ireland, but I think some of the reason why he's picked, I would imagine, is his ball carrying ability. Cian Healy didn't carry at all last week. Herring didn't carry. Tyke Furlong made carries and was brilliant. So you have two of your front rows who are not carrying the ball, and that puts a lot of pressure on your back five in the game. So I think bringing Kilcoyne in there gives you Furlong making carries, Kilcoyne making carries, and they're very, very good carriers. They're powerful, they're dynamic, and you would hope that they'd get the opportunity to maybe win that game line. And then that translates, Adrian, right back to your back five, that hopefully then your second rows will be next in line. And then when your back rows do make carries, it doesn't work in that order, if you like, that you're sending your front row up first, then your second row, then your back row. But if you have your props making good carries and that the ball is quick and the clean out is good, when Stander, when Conan, Van de Fleer, Tyburn get the ball, you would hope that there's a little bit of a chaotic, fragmented defence there. But look, sometimes, and against England, they're very, very physical and they're very, very good defensively. So we are going to have to just truck the ball up at times to regenerate the ball and go through the phases. But he gives you that extra option. But of course, as you said at the start, the question is, he's got to get his scrummaging right from the word go. I thought our scrumming line-out has been good. Making this decision, John Fogarty or Paul O'Connell or Andy Farrell, in their conversations, I think they're impressed enough with Dave Kilcoyne and probably the scrummaging they've done in training and what they've seen in the matches so far to believe he can get that part of his game right, because the ball carrying dynamic ability that he brings can be brilliant and would be very useful for Ireland on Saturday.
On the decision then to start Jacob Stockdale ahead of James Lowe, I think this is something that a lot of people would have seen coming during the week, Alan, that James Lowe wouldn't start this weekend. Is there a little bit of a short-term memory going on, though, when it comes to Stockdale and what he has provided defensively for Ireland?
Yeah, there is, but he's a very talented player, and I think he has an ability to score tries. And there's always he has that kudos and that ability to do something special with the ball. The concern, of course, and you can't just forget that. But I'm sure that information, and the coaches in Ulster and the Irish coaches, I'm sure they've given him that information and he's worked on it. And there's some tiny similarities there, because again, it's just body position, it's aggression, and it's similar to James Lowe. It's not that they don't want the contact or they're scared of smashing someone. I think it's technique. It's just having that engine on, fired up, that aggressive kind of intense when you don't have the ball, and how they defend sensibly as well. You know, Jacob Stockdale, we've seen him before come up and in, and the ball go out over his head, or he just not number up properly, and then just be caught static with some of his tackles. So I think it's just really important. Look, I think he'd be very, very determined, and that's sometimes a great place to have a player. It's kind of like Bundy Aki coming back into the team. I think they'll be fired up. They've got to do it in a measured way. But, you know, I think, of course, Jacob Stockdale is too talented to leave out of the Irish side and write him off. But I'm sure he will know what he's got to do defensively. And that's the part of the game that he's got to be bang on. Because I think England will get a couple of opportunities. And what they've done to us with those opportunities in the past is they've punished us. They've just been ruthless. The way they started the game here 2 years ago in Dublin with the Johnny May try, then the Elliot Daly try. It's the way they started. They came to Dublin, they scored after very early in the game with Johnny May, and there was just a kind of an eerie silence in the stadium, and they were sprinting back full of energy. So even though there's no crowd this time, I think we just can't. It's important that Ireland, you know, go out and start the game well. It might not be on the scoreboard, because it doesn't work that way, that you have to go and score all the time and for your confidence to go sky high. But they've got to come up with a few big defensive plays, a couple of turnovers. They've been excellent at the breakdown. So they've got to force a lot of pressure on England and hope that they make mistakes. But the worry and the concern here is, look, England probably changed gears last week, and we've only seen glimpses of how good they can be at the way they were at the World Cup in that semi-final. I think the character and the pressure they put on France last week was a very high intensity. So I think they'll be only better for that game and getting that win right at the end. So it's up to Ireland to match that, and they're the ones that probably are under more pressure to try and get a result. Both sides will be disappointed but if you finish losing a game here, it's seen as a really bad Six Nations for both sides.
We'll see how it pans out, and of course neither are kicking teams, Quinny, we're told, so that definitely won't be a feature. What's your, just very briefly before we ask you about CJ Stander, what's going to happen? Who's going to win it?
I'm optimistic that Ireland will of course you can't fault the character this side. I think just tactically they've just made poor decisions at times on the field. They've done a hell of a lot of good stuff. There's people crying and shouting for more attack, better shape. I would say better shape in attack is what we need. International rugby is tough. You don't break teams down easily, but a lot of these guys were there in 2018 and before that, and they brought an efficiency their whole game that was just wearing the life out of the oppositions. We've seen glimpses of it at times. They've got to be a lot better this week, and they've got to beat more defenders. 6 defenders beaten last Sunday against Scotland is not enough. And the concern is defensively. So when England get that tempo and pace up, they can break teams down. We missed 22 tackles last week. So Ireland have got to be rock solid. I'm not expecting a game where there's going to be loads of attack here. Both sides kick the ball a lot, but I'm optimistic but fearful that England will just have enough to get over the line.
CJ Stander then, obviously a shock announcement during the week that he was going to be leaving and he's heading back to South Africa, it seems, end of the season. So what's your do you know him, Quinny? Would you be a fella that you'd bump into, have a chat with, your sense of him and the loss that'll be left behind him?
Yeah, I do know him from over the years from chatting to him and meeting him on many, many occasions. I wouldn't be good friends with CJ because I don't keep in contact with him, but he's incredibly polite. Everybody has nothing but good words to say about CJ Stander, and I think he's had a phenomenal run for Munster and Ireland. His work rate has just been through the roof. I just admire his efforts all the time. He's not the most skillful player. It's not part of his game to be an offloader or a sidestepper. He loves kind of running out over people and loves the contact. But he's added to his game over the years, and that's what got him selected on the British and Irish Lions in 2017. He was brilliant in that Grand Slam win. He's been involved twice beating the All Blacks. There's so many accolades there for him to take away with him. It is a shock that he's retiring and that he's finishing, and he'll be a loss to Munster and Ireland, because I think he's another area of his game is the breakdown. I think the turnovers he gets. He's been sensational, but he'll be a loss. His legacy is pretty firmly intact, and people, particularly in Munster, and who know him better and who he's who'll be close to him, they've massive respect for the way he turns up and trains and performs consistently, and I think he's done that right from the word go. So it's a big shock, but it's an understandable one in a sense. And I know the project player people are I'm not sure what people want him to do here, because people are saying, oh, he's going back to South Africa, and the project player kind of jumps up with that scenario. But look, that's where he's from. It's probably a debate for another day, and it'll rumble on. It's 5 years now for project players, but it's a big shock.
Look, he's not expected to have to spend the rest of his. He's not expected to have to spend the rest of his life there, I suppose, if that's not his wish. Having said that, and there's been some very cynical people out there, Quinny, who've been suggesting this week that he might be likely to turn up in one of the South African club shirt at some point in the not too distant future. Do you expect that that's him now done, or is there a chance he turns up for the Bulls or one of the teams down there?
Well, it could happen. I think that's. I don't think there's any evidence to back that up. I think it's speculation. We don't know what way the contract conversations went, and whether he was getting offered what he wanted here. I've always said this to you before: when you get contracts and you have stuff on the table, if you want to get a contract that turns your head or not, and maybe he's not got the contract that he wanted, and his body might be bruised and battered, which is understandable as well. His family are back in South Africa. He'll be a wealthy farmer back in South Africa, and I often visualise that scenario going, if I was him and what he's achieved, to be able to kind of down tools when you're on top of your game and go back and be content in that. It'd be a lovely place to be for someone. But I think if he pops up playing with the Blue Bulls or one of the South African franchises, I think, well, then that'll irk people, and people won't be happy with that. But again, it's his own business. Contracts they can work both ways. He can be cast aside very, very quickly as well. And there's no ownership on CJ Stander. He can do what he wants. But I do hope that we're not having this conversation, that you're not saying to me in 6 months, well, why did CJ come back out of retirement, and why is he playing for the Blue Bulls against Munster or Leinster in the Rainbow Cup? Or I hope that's not the case. But again, it's his own decision, and we just got to take it at face value and what he says, that he's retiring for those kind of reasons. But if I was any of those provinces there or teams in South Africa, yeah, I think he should. The question is, some of them might try and tempt him back out and play again.
Yeah. That would certainly put a different sheen on the statement during the week. Enjoy the rugby over the weekend. We'll listen to you. Thanks a million.
Cheers. Thanks, lads.
Thanks a lot, Alan Quinlan, as always on a Friday, taking us through the weekend's rugby. And what an interesting weekend in store we have as well.